Senate Committee on Agriculture, Food Production, and Outdoor Resources will come to order. Kyle, would you please call the roll?
Senators Bean,
Here.
Berger,
Here.
Bernsketter, Crawford, Gregory, McCreary, Washington. Yes,
We have a quorum. Just before we get started, I'd just like to say welcome everybody. Welcome to the committee. Want to just say a special thank you to Senator Bernsketter for his leadership on this committee for many years, and welcome Senator Berger here as our new vice chair. Just want to say we want to keep this respectful and all that. And I do want to say one thing though: no outbursts are allowed unless you want to tell Kyle Abishon happy birthday today, because today is his birthday. So he'll shoot me later. So I appreciate everybody who has traveled across the state to attend and participate in today's hearing. For those who are testifying on legislation, please speak into the microphone, introduce yourself, and address your comments to the committee members. Please keep your comments relevant to the legislation. Once your testimony concludes, the committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions. Please complete the witness appearance form on the table and leave it on the table for our committee minutes. Please silence your cell phones at this time if you're not already. Today we're going to hear two bills, and first up is my Senate Bill 28. So I'm going to turn the gavel over to Senator Berger, and we'll get this going.
Senator Bean, proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, for the record, Senator Jason Bean, representing the 25th District, here to present for your consideration Senate Bill 28. Senate Bill 28 addresses two issues with cotton trailers. First, it increases the miles per hour from 40 miles an hour up to 65 miles an hour, the maximum speed at which cotton trailers may travel, and repeals a requirement that cotton trailers be used exclusively for transporting cotton. So why do we want to increase the speed limit? Just kind of tell you a little bit of progression of cotton production. Used to, we would pick the cotton, dump it in a four-wheel trailer, and then take that to the gin. Today, the baler pickers pick the cotton, actually bale it, very similar to a hay bale or a round hay bale, and then we put it on semi-trailers and we transport it. So we can transport it a lot faster and a lot safer now than ever before. Second, this bill also provides that cotton trailers shall not be used in violation of the law regulating the securing of loads, providing it is traveling at speeds less than 65 miles an hour from the field to field or field to market and return. And no portion of such goods or material becomes dislodged or falls from the cotton trailer. So when we talk about how burdensome this is to strap these bales, when we put these bales on a trailer, most of our drivers now are a little bit older, so it's quite a task to secure these loads. And these cotton bales are a lot different than the hay bales. They sit a lot flatter, and they're a lot heavier, so they will sit and be on the trailer, and they don't really move around. Last year, this legislation passed out of this committee unanimously, and was the only bill in which passed the Missouri Senate unanimously and without any amendments. Unfortunately, the House loaded it up towards the end of the last session, and we were not able to go to conference to clean it up. This legislation modernized state law with today's farming practices. I appreciate your support and be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of the senator? Anyone testifying in support of Senate Bill 28? Anyone testifying in opposition of Senate Bill 28? Oh, I'm sorry. Please come forward. And make
Morning.
sure you fill out your witness form, please.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mark Figgenbaum testifying on behalf of Missouri Farm Bureau. We believe that the current limits put on cotton trailers actually make them a little more dangerous for folks on the road who might be moving at much higher speeds, and also for the folks driving the trailers themselves. We believe this legislation is a step in the right direction, making our roads safer, as well as allowing farmers the flexibility to haul the loads in a way that they believe fit and safe. And that concludes my testimony.
Any questions of the witness? Any others testifying in support of? Anyone in opposition of? Anyone testifying for informational purposes only? I do have one question, Senator.
Yes, sir.
What is a cotton bale's weight?
Cotton bales, it kind of depends on what time you pick them, because early in the morning they'll be a little bit heavier or a little lighter toward the the middle of the day.
Right.
But typically anywhere from 5,500 to 6,200 pounds.
They're compressed down that much then. That's
Absolutely, yeah. They and the new systems, even the newer systems, wrap those things tighter and tighter. So.
Thank you, Senator. Moving on to the next bill.
All right, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 28. Next up is Senate Bill 14, sponsored by Senator Justin Brown. And Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Senator Justin Brown, representing the 16th Senatorial District. Today I'm here to present Senate Bill 14. Senate Bill 14 allows the existing process in place under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act to be sufficient to satisfy any requirement for a warning label. This would apply to all crop protection products regulated by FIFRA and would be consistent with the recent opinion from the U.S. Court of Appeals. After an opinion article was announced in 2015 and California utilized its opinion to trigger its Prop 65 cancer warning requirement, U.S. trial lawyers began running advertising campaigns to recruit people for lawsuits. The current U.S. glyphosate litigation began just months after the publication of this opinion. In April 2019, the EPA published the results of its latest assessment of glyphosate and stated EPA continues to find that there are no risks to public health when glyphosate is used in accordance with its current label. I filed SB14 because a company should not be required to warn consumers of something that no regulatory body around the globe has found to be true, nor should they be sued because of this such. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate this hearing, and I am open to any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Brown? Seeing none, is there anyone here to testify in support of Senate Bill 14? Would you please come forward? Is the green light?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. I'm Liza Lockwood, Bayer's Medical Affairs Lead based right here in Missouri. I'm a medical doctor, an emergency physician, a medical toxicologist, and a mom. My background is in human health risk assessment. I am here today in support of Senate Bill 14. I want to start by thanking Chairman Bean and the committee for hearing this important issue and Senator Brown for sponsoring the legislation. As many of you know, Bayer has deep roots in Missouri. We have several thousand employees working in Missouri, primarily in St. Louis, which is the home of our company's crop science business and a global headquarters for our seeds and traits business. Missouri is a critical part of our efforts to bring new tools and technologies to farmers here and around the globe to help feed and fuel a growing planet. St. Louis is the hub of our innovation and the U.S. headquarters for research and development. We're proud to invest more than $2.5 billion annually in global research and development innovations for crop science, more than double the amount of any of our competitors. Bayer is also the manufacturer of Roundup agricultural herbicides, which includes the active ingredient glyphosate. In fact, Bayer is the only domestic producer of glyphosate. These products have been the subject of litigation and significant media attention for many years now. Today, glyphosate-based herbicides are the most widely used weed control products in the world. The widespread adoption is due not only to the effectiveness and extensive economic and environmental benefits, but also due to the strong safety profile of these products. When it comes to safety assessments, glyphosate is among the most extensively tested pesticide on the market. For more than 50 years, leading health regulators around the world have repeatedly concluded that our glyphosate products can be used safely, and glyphosate does not cause cancer. The confusion about glyphosate and cancer primarily stems from one place, an opinion by a European group called the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC. I think it's important to take a moment to address a few key points. IARC is not a regulatory authority and did no original scientific research. IARC's opinion is inconsistent with the conclusions of regulatory authorities, not just in the United States, but all over the world. These regulatory authorities have actually assessed all of the studies that were examined by IARC and all of the other studies as well. And they reevaluate this product every 3 to 5 years because different agencies around the world regulate it at different times. We are registered in over 160 countries. Despite the clear statutory language and decades of judicial precedent in place under FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, states have started to regulate pesticides in a manner that directly contradicts the Environmental Protection Agency's decades-long conclusion regarding safety. Some states like California have attempted to impose a labeling requirement on this product that is contradictory to existing regulations and the expansive body of science. Senate Bill 14 would simply ensure that any pesticide registered within the EPA and sold under a label consistent with the EPA's own determination is sufficient to satisfy requirements for health and safety warnings. It does not preclude anyone from suing pesticide manufacturers. It only affects the health and safety warning labels that already have an extensive regulatory process backing it up. Pesticides undergo a rigorous development and review process, taking approximately 12 years before they're even introduced to the field. This strict regulatory process, including multiple agencies and hundreds of scientific experts, ensure that pesticides on the market have met high health and environmental safety standards and are safe for use according to EPA specifications. Once a pesticide reaches the market, these same scientists continue to review all the new studies that come along afterwards to ensure the safety of existing products. As an ag manufacturer, we have the duty to report any adverse finding in a timely manner, and failing to do so can result in significant penalties. I've been part of that process. For half a century, glyphosate has been instrumental in allowing American farmers to affordably protect their crops from weeds, keep yields high, and compete in the global market. Glyphosate is critical to conservation practices, including soil conservation through reduced tillage, which results in less soil erosion, fuel savings, and less carbon emissions. Missouri farmers rely on pesticides. Glyphosate is used on 66% of corn acres, 91% of soybean acres, and 98% of cotton acres in the state. Without pesticides, crop losses could be as high as 85%. And without glyphosate, farmers' input costs could more than double. Imagine hand weeding a cornfield in Missouri. This is why we need your help today. We need legislative certainty that while states have every right to build the federal government's baseline regulation, states like California, they should not have the ability to directly contradict the scientific findings and ignore the rigorous review processes already in place. If farmers can't rely on a consistent set of science-based rules, it becomes very difficult to make long-term plans on what to plant, how much, and when, making an already challenging profession even harder. The legal challenges we've been facing for more than almost 10 years now have not only caused significant legal costs, but also many uncertainties. Continuing to lose billions of dollars on an approved product based on scientifically unsound claims is unsustainable. Money invested in litigation costs could otherwise be invested into R&D, bringing new tools and innovations to farmers. It's becoming more and more untenable to see a path forward without some sort of legislative certainty. The industry needs your help, and we need your help to protect a safe, effective, and invaluable tool for farmers here and around the globe. I respectfully ask you to vote for passage of Senate Bill 14 and move it to the Senate floor. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Washington?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned that Bayer was a domestic company.
Yes. Well, so Bayer Crop Science headquarters is in St. Louis, Missouri.
But we will
And
admit
we are
that
the-
Bayer itself is not a domestic company, right?
Bayer itself is headquartered in Germany.
Okay.
That said, we are the only domestic producers of glyphosate.
Okay, so you are the only one produced in America
Yes.
as opposed to being a domestic company. Okay, that clarifies for me. And then my second thing is, you mentioned that it kind of seems like you alluded to like the Roundup and all that stuff wasn't really dangerous or whatever. So are all the courts and the farmers and the people that have died and have the sicknesses, is that not from Roundup, or is that just something they made up?
So Roundup does not have significant human health impacts. And we have looked at this in great detail around the world. So while we completely empathize with people who get sick,
And
it's
die.
not because of exposure to Roundup. Roundup has no carcinogenic effects. And this is
So the money that you all have paid out, you just paid it out of the goodness of your heart, or I'm confused.
the way the litigation works, I will leave to attorneys to answer that question. But the scientific evidence clearly shows that there is no association between Roundup or glyphosate exposure and any kind of cancer. The National Cancer Institute of the United States of America has done a study that has followed over 50,000 farmers for decades now. And they have, who specifically have used lots of different pesticides, including Roundup. And they have shown repeatedly that there is no association between Roundup exposure in these folks and any kind of health outcome, including cancer. The European Union just reauthorized Roundup use in the EU for 10 years.
Is it
And
the same formula?
It's the same formulations, yes. And they have reviewed all of that data too because of allegations like this. And they wrote an 11,000-page paper that demonstrated that there was no association between Roundup exposure and any kind of cancer. The last thing I'll say about this is that you're not seeing lawsuits anywhere else in the world. And they've tried to bring some lawsuits, but you have to have a scientific basis for your claim in order to bring a lawsuit like this in other parts of the world. And Australia just recently said no.
Could you get us that information?
What's that?
Could you get that information to us?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Be
thank
happy
you.
to.
Any further questions for this witness? Senator McCreary?
Good morning. Were you with Monsanto before it, I guess, was purchased by Bayer?
Yes, I was. So
Okay.
I started out in academics at Washington University. I was the section chief for the toxicology program and the faculty, and then went to Monsanto. And the day I started working there, Bayer acquired the company.
Okay, very good. So one of my questions, and it might be better for another witness, I feel like anybody that's been to even a few business school classes, when you're thinking about acquiring a company, you're going to look at the benefits of acquiring the company, but also the potential costs, risks, that kind of thing. And it seems to me like some of what we're hearing is it seems as if Bayer is surprised that there are folks that have been harmed by this chemical. So walk me through, and I feel like if I was going to buy a company that had some outstanding risks, because when the company was acquired, there were lawsuits going on. So wouldn't that have been factored into the price of the company?
So I can partially answer this
Okay.
because this is not my expertise.
Yeah.
But when Bayer acquired the company, there were 10 lawsuits pending, as far as I understand. And so they knew that the science was rigorous behind this product, and it is the most important product in global agriculture. It is the foundation of global agriculture. So they thought that the science would prevail.
Okay, so there were discussions about that, and I understand you're not in the C-suite.
I don't know if there were,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know what the
yeah, yeah.
discussions were. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so your thesis on this is that it started out with just 10 lawsuits, and then after Bayer acquired Monsanto, then things escalated.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further questions? I have one quick question. Where else is glyphosate produced where is glyphosate produced outside of the United States?
In China.
Only in China.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up in favor of Senate Bill 14, would you please come forward? Can I give a quick show of hands? How many are here to testify in favor? How many are those to testify against? Okay. All I ask is that we do not repeat testimony and to move things along quickly. Please proceed.
Good morning. Thanks for hearing this, and this is an important issue. My name is Randy Rogers. I'm immediate past chairman of the Missouri Agribusiness Association. I'm also a farmer and also the agronomy team lead for Service and Supply Co-op, a medium-sized cooperative in East Central Missouri. I'm here to speak in favor of this. For 50 years, when I started in high school, we started using Roundup. It was an amazing product. We could kill weeds, roots and all, and it enabled us to do no-till and things that have preserved our soil on our farm to this date. After farming for 20 years, the 80s put me in the agribusiness circle, and for 30 years I've been employed at a local cooperative, and we've been using ag chemicals to help us increase the production of crops. I also have 5 grandkids and 2 kids that grew up on the farm, and we've been using Roundup to help control weeds all the time. Nothing is as important as the health of my family and the health of the employees and the people that we work with. If we thought there was a risk, we would do something different. You know, we wouldn't use the product. So we've been doing that for 50 years. As a business, we need some continuity and some security in knowing that when science says it's safe, that these products are not going to get taken away from us, or the companies that are producing them are not going to go out of business because of some non-science-based information. That's, like I said, agriculture is a big part of Missouri economy. It employs a lot of people. There's a lot of families, and very important. FIFRA, since I started at ag retail, it's been drilled into us over and over. The label is the law. The label is the law. There's multiple pages on the label. We read those and share that with our employees, share with them what the protective equipment is that they need to be using, and we can't see them every minute of every day, but our employees, we're using concentrations of that, but it is so beneficial to help us maintain our agriculture. I don't know if some of you more urban folks, Asian honeysuckle is an issue that we've been fighting. It's taking over our conservation areas. Roundup is such an effective tool on it that they're flying it on with helicopters and drones because there's no other way to control Asian honeysuckle in the woods. These products are important to the future of agriculture and to the future of the economy in the state of Missouri. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up in favor of Senate Bill 14, please come forward. Anybody here in favor of?
Apologize, Mr. Chairman. Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries of Missouri. I want to be here in support of this legislation. We were a party to the lawsuit challenging the Prop 65 requirement in California. to label products as causing cancer. You may be familiar with that. That's an initiative where many of your products around your home, you can go and look on the back of them. They'll have a sticker that says this product is known to the state of California to cause cancer. They were attempting to impose that on glyphosate products. We challenged that as part of a coalition, a national coalition, and we were eventually found to be right. The only group that has found any connection or claims to have any connection between cancer and glyphosate is this IARC that you heard about. That is not a regulatory body. The EPA has reviewed hundreds of studies on this subject and found it to be a safe product. And so we're here to testify in support of this, saying that should be sufficient. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, you did fill out a witness form, correct?
It's online.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you. Next up in favor, Senate Bill 14, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, Shannon Cooper today representing the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. Go on record in support of the bill, and several of your committee members will understand what I'm getting ready to say here, but glyphosate products have been a game changer for the cattle industry, and you only have to look at the history of weaning weights with when this product came on board from where they were 50 years ago to where they are today, and it is probably one of the most effective tools we have for rangeland management. And Mr. Chairman, I think you pointed out the only other place that produces this product is China. And not that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but if you run out our domestic producer and you recognize the percentage of our farm, row crop, and cattle that use this product to manage and take care of weed control, if there was one bad batch shipped into here during one season, it would devastate this country. And if you think I'm crazy, you look back in history at the sheetrock issue, the pet food issues, the tires, the pet feed, things that we purchase from China. There have been instances where things have gone miserably wrong. And for this body to sit idle and let these lawsuits continue based on what I would call fake science is a shame. And we respectfully ask that you guys push this forward quickly so that agriculture producers in this state have the comfort of knowing that what they are buying is proven and is good and will do the job it's supposed to do. Be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank you.
testimony. Next up in favor, Senate Bill 14.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Ben Travis with the Missouri Soybean Association. I'm just going to say that we'll go on record in support of this legislation for reasons already stated.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you for testimony.
Thank
Next up in favor, Senate Bill 14.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jacob Knable with the Missouri Corn Growers Association. We've already heard a lot of really good testimony, but all I have to add at this point is just a personal story. I used to work on a research farm for a university, and we would have to weed these fields by hand, these soybean fields, and typically it's a very long process, especially in a smaller field. I could get through about 4 rows in an 8-hour work shift. So just kind of is a statement to or a testament to the quality of a product that glyphosate has been in shaping American agriculture. Any questions?
Any questions for this witness? One comment, my father believed that you got up at about 4:30 in the morning and went out and chopped cotton, so I understand. Thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Next up in favor, Senate Bill 14. Maybe a little bit better.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mark Figgenbaum with Missouri Farm Bureau. We believe that these products are thoroughly and rigorously tested by the EPA and that those tests are good enough for the labels that are currently on the products. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Washington.
I thank you for being here. I hate to pick on you, but real quick, what happens if the EPA's regulations are laxed?
What's that?
What happens if the EPA lifts their regulations and they're laxed and they don't enforce the way they did, say, like last month?
I believe that would be the responsibility of the EPA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up in favor, Senate Bill 14. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Luke Reed on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, here to support Senate Bill 14 for the reasons mentioned before, especially the consistency in requirements for regulations. And there's my witness form. And also happy birthday, Kyle, since no one else has mentioned that. Any questions for the witness? Thank you for your testimony. You have a birthday coming up. Next up in favor, Senate Bill 14.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brent Hemphill here on behalf of the Missouri Pork Association. As a generational farmer, still farming, Roundup is as important as the tractor, is as important as the combine. And so I can't stress how Roundup has saved the ag industry from erosion and all sorts of different challenges. And so I just ask you to use science as your judge and not your what you believe to be true. It doesn't make it true. Let's look at the science. For that, I'll try to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up in favor of Senate Bill 14, please come forward. Anybody here else in favor of? Madam Speaker, great to have you here.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to thank you for hearing this bill. I also want to thank Senator Brown for sponsoring this bill. You've heard a lot already this morning. I just kind of want to boil it down as much as I can. This legislation is pretty simple. It says if the EPA...
Excuse me, could you state your name? And
I'm sorry. My name's Catherine Hanaway. I'm a partner at Hush Blackwell in St. Louis. I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 14. Got rolling a little quick on you.
Please proceed.
This piece of legislation simply says if EPA requires a cancer warning, then the state requires a cancer warning. If EPA doesn't, then Missouri would not. And the problem that we're trying to address here is that a patchwork is starting to be created around the entire country with different requirements for warning labels so that you cannot know what should be on a Roundup label. And most dangerously, this patchwork isn't being created by legislators like you. It's being created by thousands of trial court judges around the country. And Senator Washington, you asked a question about, well, why are these cases being lost? The vast majority of these cases are being won. 15 of the last 22 cases that went to a jury were won by Bayer Monsanto. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we got here. You've heard about IARC. I just want to tell you a little bit more. No regulator in the world said that Roundup caused cancer or that glyphosate caused cancer until, I'll call it a study group called IARC, over a 2-week period, read research done by other people, and then sat and met kind of like a book club and concluded that they were going to say, they still weren't going to go all the way to saying that glyphosate caused cancer, just that it was a probable carcinogen. Well, that IARC ruling triggered the litigation that you've heard about in California, where a coalition of wheat growers and corn growers and soybean growers and the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, the Associated Industries of Missouri, Iowa Agribusiness, 11 attorneys general from ag states, a bipartisan group led by then Attorney General Josh Hawley, filed an amicus brief, and the Ninth Circuit, the most liberal circuit in the country, concluded that you could not require a cancer warning on Roundup in California because the IARC conclusion is not shared by a consensus of the scientific community, and that at best the label would be, if required, false, misleading, or at least factually controversial in violation of the First Amendment rights of Bayer. And so there's nothing in this legislation that would prevent lawsuits from going forward in the future. It would just set an objective standard for what a warning label has to be. And that standard would be, if a product is registered with the EPA, it's what the EPA says should be on that warning label. So for the farmers, for all the people who work for Bayer, I really urge you to pass this bill out of committee. be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness, Senator Washington?
Thank you for being here, Madam Speaker. It's always wonderful to see
Nice to see you,
the
Senator.
history-making woman of the Missouri legislature. Wish she could have eventually been on the second floor, but I digress. So you mentioned that it doesn't prevent lawsuits. Are the lawsuits that have mostly been filed the failure to warn lawsuits?
They have a number of different causes of action. That
Okay, what
has
are
been
the-
one of them. You know, the other kind of the standard tort panoply of negligence, other torts. Yes.
So if we were to do this, if this passes and failure to warn would go away, is that correct?
You could make that. I mean, if an appropriate warning that complied with state law was not on the product, you could always bring that failure to warn claim. This would say that the warning's sufficient if it complies with EPA standards. If for some reason it didn't comply with EPA standards, you could still bring that count.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for this witness?
Thank you.
Senator, do you have a question? Senator Gregory. Thank you for your testimony. Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 14? Anybody here else in favor? All right, we're going to move to those here in opposition of Senate Bill 14. Please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Matt Clement. I'm an attorney here in Jefferson City, Missouri. I've been practicing law for about 30 years, and I'm in opposition of this bill. A lot of questions have been asked of witnesses in support of this bill that I think are relevant, but one of the things that I've heard is junk science. And I was involved in a case here in Cole County in the fall of 2023 where a jury of 12 Cole County citizens, conservative folks here in Cole County, heard all the evidence. There were hearings about whether the science could even be submitted to the jury. Those have happened all over the country. And not one judge has said the science is junk science. It simply is not junk science. I learned a lot about what the EPA actually does through my representation of these folks, and Senator Washington asked a question about what happens if the EPA regulations are lax. I think it's important for you to understand what the EPA actually does. The EPA only reviews chemicals like this every 15 years, and it only hears what the manufacturer wants it to hear. It doesn't do its own independent studies. In fact, it does no independent studies, and Monsanto has not studied, and Bayer has not studied Roundup since 1993. Hasn't done any studies on it since 1993. The EPA is also susceptible to influence from the manufacturers because the manufacturers are the only ones that provide information to the EPA. There's an internal document that we uncovered through this lawsuit where the head of the EPA's Cancer Assessment Committee is talking directly to the Bayer representative and the Monsanto representative. And in the email, he's quoted as saying, if I can kill this, referring to a study that's against Roundup and glyphosate, saying it causes cancer. He says, if I can kill this, I should get a medal. To me, Missouri relying on the EPA and saying the EPA is the end-all, be-all is false, is flawed. And what you're doing is hurting Missouri citizens from bringing claims that they otherwise should be able to bring. I heard that Roundup is used all over the world, and no one has found that it causes cancer. Well, formulated Roundup that's used here for agriculture applications in the United States is banned in the European Union because the U.S. formulated Roundup has what's called a surfactant. It's called POEA, and a surfactant is something that causes the chemical to absorb into the plant and stay on the plant. That's why it works so well. But it also causes it to stay on your skin and absorb into your skin. And the European Union says you can't use that in Europe. But the EPA has said it's fine. Now, in 2022, The same Ninth Circuit Court that I heard witnesses testify about said the most recent assessment by the EPA of glyphosate and Roundup was flawed, and they had to start over. That was in 2022. It's a different case. It's called the National Resource Defense case, commonly known as NRDC. In 2022, they said your cancer assessment is wrong. You have to start over. So what that means is the next most recent assessment by the EPA was in 1993. So if you pass this bill, what you're saying to Bayer and Monsanto is go back to 1993, and as long as you comply with what the EPA said back then, no one can sue you for anything, no matter what you knew, no matter when you knew it, no matter what you warned people about. You're out of luck because in 1993 the EPA said this was okay. I don't think that's good government. I don't think you should be putting corporations like that over Missouri citizens. Bayer is not going to stop selling this product. They make $7 million per day in gross profit on this. All we're saying is allow state law to serve as a check and balance on these folks. There's no other way to enforce it. There's no other way to force them to tell the EPA the truth and to tell their consumers and their customers. All you got to do is put a warning label on it. EPA has looked at well, let me back up. Monsanto, since 1980, has asked the EPA to change its label 40 different times, more than 40 different times. Not once have they said, hey, put a warning that it might cause cancer. Not once have they said, use personal protective equipment. Not one time. And they could have done it. In 2022, the EPA said if the manufacturer asks, a cancer warning could be included, but they haven't asked. Respectfully, what they're asking you to do is give them immunity. You don't have to tell people what you know. You don't have to tell people when you knew it. And they can keep selling their product in Missouri and not be held accountable by anybody who may be harmed by it. Missouri farmers and Missouri users will be treated differently than farmers in Iowa, Arkansas, Illinois, all over the country. And frankly, we don't think that's good policy. We're in opposition to the bill, and with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions to the witness? Senator Washington.
Hi, thank you for being here today. Just a couple of quick questions. You yourself, are you a plaintiff's attorney?
Yes.
And have you filed Roundup suits yourself?
Yes.
Okay. So, if this passes, do you feel that would eliminate your ability? Well, I'm sorry. What cause of action did you file those under?
Well, as Ms. Hanaway said, there's various causes of action that are filed in these cases. Failure to warn is the most common one, but there are other product liability claims that we also filed. These cases turn, however, on failure to warn.
So if failure to warn is eliminated, do you feel like you would no longer be able to be successful in these cases? First, I didn't ask you. Had you been successful?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions to this witness? Senator McCurry.
Thank you. Good morning. Could you restate what you were talking about with the document you found on discovery where an employee said that they should win a medal? I sort of missed the first part of that.
Sure. I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't very clear with what it said. It was an internal email at Monsanto where the Monsanto employees are talking amongst themselves, and it's an email from their director of agency relations, which is basically their go-between between the EPA and Monsanto.
Okay. So government agencies.
Right.
Okay.
And what he is saying to another employee is that he talked to the head of the EPA's Cancer Assessment Committee, and that person told him, he was asking him to kill this study that was found to be against Monsanto's interest.
Okay.
And the EPA employee said, if I can kill this, I should get a medal.
And what year was that?
That was in 2015.
So fairly, not 93, fairly
Right.
more recently. Okay,
Right.
very good. Thank you.
Any further questions to the witness? Senator Gregory.
Couple things. Just heard you say that on the label that they had never asked to put anything about PPE on there. Is that
Right.
what you said? So I just pull up a label for Roundup Power Max, and it talks about PPE. It's on the label, and user safety recommendations should wash your hands before eating and drinking, remove clothing immediately if it gets on the inside. I mean, there's things on here about what to wear and what you're using when you're mixing the chemical. So that's been on the label. I don't know where you're talking about and updating. Have there been any lawsuits against any other companies that have glyphosate in formulations, specifically like, say, Syngenta with Touchdown Total?
I don't know of any other lawsuits. There may be some. I'm not aware of them.
Could it be safe to say, have you ever heard of there's a skull and crossbone chemical, gramoxone. You ever heard of that?
No.
Could it be safe to say that why is Bayer, in your opinion, borne the front of this? If someone has been, say, a dedicated Syngenta customer user of chemicals, so they've been spraying Touchdown Total, is it just because all of a sudden one day they needed an extra 5 gallons, and so they had receipt purchase history of the Bayer product, and then eventually came down with something that's like, hey, I bought that at one point in time. I see people with these lawsuits. I'm going to jump in on that.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question for sure, but
You've been buying Touchdown Total, which
Okay.
you said you've not been sure if there's been any lawsuits filed against a different company.
right.
And that's been my question this whole time is, why hasn't there been, why has Bayer been bearing the front of this?
Well, I think what I would say to that is the hypothetical person that you're talking about, I think, would have a hard time winning their lawsuit, because you would have to prove to the jury that Roundup, Monsanto's chemical, was the cause or contributed to cause the injury. And I don't think that person would be successful if he only used Roundup 1 or 2 times and used some other chemical multiple times.
But what if it's the same formulation, because the patent has now gone offline,
Right.
and is being produced by other companies, likely in the same formulation?
Well, the law would not allow you to hold Monsanto liable if you purchase somebody else's product, even though the same chemical might be in it. The law would not allow that. To answer your question about why these other companies have not been sued as much as Monsanto's been sued, I think largely it's market share. I mean, Monsanto's clearly the largest producer of glyphosate and Roundup in the United States. And Merck produces a similar product. It warns about cancer on its labels, on its documents that it sells with those chemicals. So other companies may warn about it. That may be another explanation.
Okay, so, I know some people that farm around border states. Say in Missouri, we were to require a label of this product may, all right? Would it then be illegal for someone that purchases in the state of Missouri to then cross a state line into Kansas and use that product?
I don't believe that would be illegal.
What if they purchased it in Kansas because maybe they're based in Racine, Kansas, right on the border, and then they purchased that product in Kansas but come into Missouri, but since it was sold in Kansas and it doesn't have the label on it that says may cause cancer, what if they come over and use it in the state of Missouri at that point?
Could Monsanto be held liable? Is that what you're asking?
At that point in time, because it's labeled in Kansas, it's sold in Kansas, that label warning is not on there, but they cross state lines using the state of Missouri at that point in time.
I believe Monsanto could be held liable at that point because they didn't warn. I mean,
So
failure to
we're-
warn.
We're getting into that patchwork that's being talked about again. And trying to find where this makes sense at is difficult to me to put it 2 and 2 together. But I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Any further questions to the witness? Senator Berger.
Thank you for being here. I just have one simple question. Have you ever used Roundup for weed control around your house or yard in a household sprayer?
I have not, but my family had a farm, and I know that they used it when I was growing up.
And the ill effects of your family from the use?
No.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness? Senator McCreary.
Good morning. Senator Gregory was asking a little bit, he was reading some labels. Is that something about washing your hands and using protection? Has that been on the label since 1993, or is that a fairly new addition?
I'm not sure of what the history of the label is with respect to that, but the label doesn't use personal protective equipment as I would understand it. It says if you get it in your eyes, wash your eyes out. If you get it on your hands, wash your hands. If you get it on your clothes, change your clothes.
Okay.
It doesn't say use gloves, use boots, things of that nature, which is what I would consider personal protective equipment.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any further questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in opposition of Senate Bill 14, please come forward. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Melissa Vatterat. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategy for Missouri Coalition for the Environment. I have written testimony here, but I'm just going to hit a couple of things. I want to make sure, can you hear me? Am I doing okay? Okay. Thank you. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of what this bill is about. There's discussion about whether or not farmers can use it, if it'll be in the market. This is about product liability and corporate accountability. I'm grateful for the dialogue that was had about duty to warn. That's the concept. If you have a product that's inherently dangerous, and I know there's discussion about what science is out there, but enough lawsuits are saying Monsanto could just get rid of, Bayer could get rid of this problem if they just put a label, a different label on it. Then they wouldn't have any lawsuits, but they're refusing to do that. Additionally, if they changed the ingredients to make it safer, they wouldn't have these lawsuits. So it's not about eliminating this product from the market. It's just making sure that you change it so it's safe, or because there's dispute about whether or not it's safe, throw a different label on the product. It doesn't have to be patchwork. They can do it, and it could be sold that way in every single state. I also think it's worth noting, I was hearing dialogue about PPE. We've had products created by Monsanto where it has hurt people. Initially, Bayer has said that there weren't consequential impacts on health or the environment. I'm talking about dioxin and PCBs. We now know that they are harmful, and even when there were labels that said to use PPE, we now know none of that was sufficient to protect people if they're using PCBs or dioxin. Do you follow what I'm saying? We can tell people to wear these things, but if the product is harmful enough, then the PPE is not going to be sufficient. I appreciate Senator Berger's question about those who've used it. Has anyone in the family had an illness as a result? I would like to just compare it to cigarettes. There are people out there like my uncle who smoked his whole life and died at 97. I also know people that smoked and died at 51. There might be different susceptibilities to the exposure. Not every single person who uses this product is inherently going to be ill, but there's enough that says maybe we should make sure that people are able to ask for compensation when they've been harmed. As legislators that represent constituents of Missouri, please choose to protect Missourians over a corporation. And that's all I'll say for now.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Washington.
Hi, thank you for coming. I just have a quick question. You mentioned PPE, which is usually worn by the employees or those who are in the factories or manufacturing plants that are making these products. Are you aware of any work comp claims or mass tort, which means a lot of people filing work claims for employees that have been injured in the process of making Roundup?
I don't have information on that, but I can get back to you.
Thank you.
And I imagine others that were here could follow up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Just real quickly, Senator Gregory, you made a comment about gramoxone. That would be paraquat, if you've heard of paraquat, that might. Yep. Next up, in opposition of Senate Bill 14. Please come forward. If you wouldn't care to get the microphone. And
Greetings, committee. All members, even the birthday member here, and the sponsor, thank you. Thank you for hearing me. My name is Ethan Duke. I'm testifying as a citizen of the state of Missouri. I heard a lot of talk about science and some other topics. It was really well discussed by people, particularly in the opposition, and I'm certainly in opposition to this bill. I will mention one thing about the science, or a couple of things, and I have several different attachments that I'll be submitting with my testimony as well. But one is a recent paper that came out in July. And I know that there's a whole gradient of scientific literacy and things, but if you take the time to go through the linkages between cancer and the areas where there's a lot of application of pesticides versus areas that they're not, it's quite striking. And also, I've been at a conference all week, but last night I made some maps for y'all, and they're actually cancer incident rates in all of your counties within your districts where there's information. So I'm submitting that as well as a fact sheet. But different, my testimony is going to be a little different in that I just want to talk a little bit about the bearing of this bill as it relates to our values. And you mentioned values earlier, Chair. I have a very rural upbringing, deeply instilled values. Integrity first, service before self, excellence in all you do. Part of my core values I adopted in the military, beginning with my service. Doing due diligence, I've provided documents in excellence, I think, with integrity. But during my early childhood, that wasn't even on the real radar. My sticks and carrots were much more true and close to home. My dad made about $80 a week. My mom kept house. So whatever was hanging from the tree or in the sink, that was food. That was dinner. It was a big deal when somebody harvested something and we were celebrated it. We were thankful about it. This is before selfies and everything, you know. It was our whole world, and it wasn't something shared. It was something sacred. And I still feel that way. But I remember one time in the early 80s, one year, my dad arrowed this really big buck. And he was so psyched about it, but he had to go to work. So he went to work, and he came back at lunchtime, and it was gone. And this has bearing to this whole bill, believe me, and it won't go on much longer. If I was a bit older, I had a job working in a sports department in a local newspaper. And I spent a lot of time talking to coaches, outdoor enthusiasts, talking about keeping kids out of courts, playing sports, and being outdoors and what that meant. And there's one guy who used to come in all the time. His name was Jan Bastian. And I didn't really know, but back then, he was a non-vet. And as a non-vet, he flew around in planes, sloshing around with a Monsanto product called napalm in the back. So years later, I came back home. My dad said, "Hey, Heath, I've been going up to the VA center, and I've been seeing Jan, watching him die. He finally passed away." He said, one of the last things he did before he died is he gave my dad a taxidermied mount of that buck. He kept it as his own. He didn't take it, but that gnawed at him. His whole life it gnawed at him. He wanted to do something to set it right. It was a good gesture, but that didn't replace the sustenance that deer would have provided my family at a time of need. And another ironic thing here, Jan died of the same cancer that so many service members died from. I guess that's another close connection I have with it. And of course, that company never paid for those costs. Our taxpayers did, and they're not paying for the cleanup costs in Nam either, or in any other places. Our taxpayers are. The corporation sees a lot of this emerging evidence. That's why they're trying to get in front of it. And they have a campaign. They said that there was another campaign on the other side. They have a campaign to scare farmers. They're not going to take away their billion-dollar product. We're just asking for accountability. They've been putting fear into producers, fear into everybody that uses their product, targeting multiple states with copycat legislation, and the representative here sees it in his house too. Same thing. So there's been a trove of internal documents. Senator McCreary asked about that one particular statement. you should see the history and the records of those internal documents. Talking about PCBs that they know that were killing farmers that were applied in paints and just saying, well, we can either let the company go or we can let these people burn. I mean, there's just so there's a trove of internal documents, a lot of internal knowledge about health effects, saving the country. I hope we can sit with this. In an era of recognition of we the people, we want to take back control. It's my understanding that many in this building feel that way. They want to take their country back. I think we should look deeply into what that means. I, for one, certainly don't think it means listen to lobbyists recite industry lines from multinational, foreign corporations, taking their word over that of we the people. Let's not take the right to afford medicine, treatment, and that sustenance. With a well-documented history of corporations' internal documents shedding light on their values, or lack thereof, and troves of data showing higher cancer rates with higher pesticide users across the country and within your districts, it may be time to dig deeper. Let's hit the pause button on this. And tell those urging you to pass this legislation for industry that we have an oath to keep to the people. You can tell them their highest priority is the welfare of the people, not to take away their rights to seek accountability. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in opposition to Senate Bill 14, please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of this committee. My name is Ben Mook. I'm an attorney also. I don't do Roundup cases. I do live on a farm in rural Clay County. I was raised in the country outside of Palmyra, Missouri. So I've seen people die that used chemicals, but I had a dad that died of lung cancer, was in NOM and was around chemicals, and of course he was a lifelong smoker. I'm here to talk really, though, about, rather than the science of what's causing cancers and what's killing people, about the information that's contained on one of these labels, because I represented Bill Bader down in the Boot Heel with regard to the dicamba litigation, and I can tell you that one of the issues that came up was whether or not information was being provided that would talk about the drift effects of the dicamba. This particular bill would impact well beyond just Roundup cases. It would also impact other cases, any case that has a FIFRA label on it. And this patchwork that we've heard fear of is kind of non-existent, because the FIFRA, that is a federal label requirement. And so it's my understanding of the label requirements is if it's a FIFRA label, it's a nationwide label. And I'm not 100% certain of that, but that is my understanding based on my experience with the Bader case. And also, I would point out, and this is kind of a side note, I think that the Roundup label that Senator Gregory was referring to might be a more recent label. I don't think that, Senator Gregory, if I may ask a question, do you happen to know what year that particular label you were looking at is from? Okay, because I don't think that the Roundup label had a hand washing requirement even, or mentioned it until 2022. Not, again, 100% certain about that, but I think that's correct. But my point on the labeling requirements and on the EPA, relying on the EPA for what goes on to those requirements, is that in the dicamba case, we had documents in which Monsanto was actively killing studies to not know about the drift that was happening. And we had documents that said, we need to kill this study or stop this study or do no more studying so we can keep a clean slate. They wanted to keep a clean slate on the testing for volatility so they could say, we've got no evidence that this drifts. And that's what they would tell the farmers. That's what they would tell the EPA. And their lack of evidence came from specifically stopping doing testing on the topic. And so if we're looking back, in 1993, I was 3 years out of high school, so I can't say what happened with that particular testing that happened for Roundup back then, but I can't imagine that that the ethics were much different in '93 than what they were doing with the dicamba in 2015. And so I would say to you that allowing an industry, we also had documents that showed that they were ghostwriting these labels for the EPA. And it's not a big secret that that happens. But to then say that we are relying on the EPA to protect people when they're using documents that are ghostwritten by the very company that's selling the product, it makes a mockery of protecting people using those products. And towards the, to say that these juries are doing something that they shouldn't be or aren't relying on evidence, there are real strict rules about what you get to put in front of a judge, about what documents say, about what's hearsay, about what the science says. And in the case on Bill Bader's case, we were in the Boot Hill and people were driving, some of them were coming down from much further down towards Kennett. They were driving an hour and a half. And these were rural people and conservative people, and they heard the evidence, and they recognized that Bill Bader had been harmed, and that it was because of a conspiracy between BASF and Monsanto to sell a product that they knew was going to harm other farmers' products and crops, and they knew that by harming those crops, they were going to increase their profits. We had a document that specifically said, what do you say to a farmer who doesn't need dicamba to deal with Roundup-tolerant weeds? The document said, tell them they'll need it for protection from their neighbor. So they knew that harming their neighbor's crops, a farmer harming his neighbor's crops, was going to sell more dicamba-tolerant seeds and therefore make them more money. And those are the folks that that are asking this committee to allow the EPA to be the ultimate arbiter of whether or not they can be sued because of a label that they helped write that has the warnings that they said it should have on it. And that's wrong for Missouri. And I appreciate your time.
Any questions for this witness? Senator McCreary.
Good morning. I appreciate you talking a little bit about dicamba. I remember when I was on House Agriculture, Representative Roan, we had a committee hearing down at the Delta Center so that we could hear from people from that entire region about their experiences with dicamba drift and things like that. And after the official government hearing, then we went on a tour and got to see all the destruction of property, including, like, I remember one of the farmers, like his own decorative flowers and such around his house were destroyed from dicamba drift. So, that was a really, I still think about that quite honestly, because it's one of those things where it's like neighbors unintentionally harming neighbors, and that really, I remember it was a really stressful time down there in that region. So, what I think I was hearing you say, though, about this idea of intentionally not studying things, is that, so your testimony is basically saying that companies, as if they were making and selling dicamba, they intentionally didn't want to know about the harm so that they could just proceed with ignorance. And
That is the conclusion you could reach based on the documents that we had, yes. Because you might have a study, a small study, that then would be potentially scaled up to be done on a field size study, and it'd be like, we're not doing any more spray studies because we don't want to have drift results.
Okay.
So yes.
So then the connection to the hearing today about Roundup then is one of the reasons maybe it hasn't been studied since '93 or whatever is they maybe don't want to know about more recent harms.
Well, that would be consistent with what the document suggested in the dicamba case that I worked on.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions to witness? Senator Gregory.
What I initially read from was 2021 or 2022. This is a copyright from Sample label is current as of 11/20/2002. And Chairman, if you let me read the couple, 3 or 4 paragraphs, all right with you?
Please proceed.
Personal protective equipment, applicators and other handlers must wear long sleeve shirt, long pants, shoes, plus socks, and protective eyewear. I mean, I'll fully admit when I mixed, I didn't have goggles on, but I made sure to have long sleeve shirt and gloves and everything else. And I was right by a sink in the shop in case something were to happen. Don't know how many times I would even just change shirts throughout the day just in case. Discard clothing and other absorbent materials that have been drenched or heavily contaminated with this product's concentrate. Do not reuse them. Follow manufacturer's instructions for cleaning/maintaining PPE. If no such instructions for washables, use detergent and hot water. Keep and wash PPE separately from other laundry. Seems pretty common sense to me. I know I wash my farm, especially livestock clothes, separate from everything else because Lord knows I don't want to put pig clothes in with the wife's nice dress or something. When handlers use closed systems and closed cabs or aircraft in a manner that meets the requirements listed in worker protection standards for agricultural pesticides, there's a reference to that. The handler PPE requirements may be reduced or modified as specified in WPS. User safety recommendations. Users should wash hands before eating, drinking, chewing gum, using tobacco, or using the toilet. Remove clothing immediately if pesticide gets inside, then wash thoroughly and put on clean clothing. So that was one from 2002.
Okay. So you're wearing PPE if I would loan you my glasses, as long as you wash that suit somewhere else.
I don't
based
know
on
that
the
I would
label.
consider sunglasses as being proper protective eyewear for mixing chemical. It says
It's a protective eyewear.
and I would say when mixing the chemical, especially, I know I'm just going to go back to the paraquat reference. When I picked that up and my retailer said this is skull and crossbones, I was like, oh boy. And I made sure to have every last thing on that day. But yeah, so the label's been there, in my opinion. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Paraquat, they actually put in, I believe, an odor agent in there, just so you know. It's yes. Okay, we've got about 20 minutes left. Do you have another question?
Just to clarify with Senator Gregory, is that from the label that the consumer or the purchaser sees, or is that from the data sheet?
That would be on, my belief is either every single jug that is sold, if memory serves correctly. It's been a while since I've actually had to buy it, but on the front of every 2.5 gallon jug or tote, which is like 250 gallons if you get it in bulk, there'll be a packet or a book.
It kind of unfurls.
Yay
or whatever.
thick, yeah, it unfurls and you're flipping through it trying to, and it's got mixing rates and whatever else, what weeds it'll kill, what rates you need to have. Mixing rates, application rates, et cetera.
Right. This hearing has been interesting to me just because I worked on a farm as a kid when I was 13 and have no memory of like any safety warnings at all. You know, it's a bunch of middle school and high school kids working, so this is really interesting.
Well, when I talked to my, you talk to, sorry, Senator, Mr. Chairman, the older generation. There's no better way to put it. I'm sorry.
All right, your testimony's
I'm sorry,
over.
Mr. Chair. About when we first started with these products, I remember when Roundup beans first came out, and I said, "What are you all doing?" Well, they were mixing with hand pump sprayers to go through the rows and take the weeds out initially. So they were walking beans with hand pump sprayers, but now we talk about spraying with an open cab tractor, and you know, the sprayers of today have charcoal filters, great filtration systems to still protect that air, but you can still sometimes smell the odor. So we've come a long ways as far as application safety goes.
And I think I'm older than the chair, but you know.
My new favorite senator. All right, any further questions for this witness? Thank you for testimony. Like I said, we've got about 15 minutes left, so anybody here else in favor or opposition of Senate Bill 14, please come forward. And like I said, we've got about 15 minutes till we will.
Okay, Lisa Panett with Armor Vine. I'd like to say that the principal of our company, she is a small farmer, and so she has taken personal interest in this bill. We want to protect both the farmers and the people's right to sue if they've been injured by a product that they were sold as safe. And that would go for the glyphosate or any other product. Modern AG Alliance was created by Bayer to serve as the face of protecting farmers And yet they're wanting to take over the sovereign controls of Missouri and put them in the hands of the EPA. The EPA says that glyphosate does not cause cancer. They also want to ban the labels that say that it causes cancer. Authority regarding the labeling is given to the states, and they want the EPA to now make those decisions. If it's not causing cancer, then there should be no fear of lawsuits. If it is causing cancer, citizens should have the right to sue for damages. This is clearly a case of big corporations versus the people. This bill is bad for the people, and we are opposed.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you. Next up in opposition.
Oh, thank you. My name is John Madras, and I'm here on behalf of the Missouri chapter of the Sierra Club. And I would just add a couple points to the discussion that you've heard so far. The first is that this is just not about glyphosate. There are a number of chemicals that we use, and the intent of most of the chemicals is to thwart or kill different things. These are powerful chemicals. They're dangerous if misused. Sometimes they're dangerous if used in exact accordance with the label. Being careful with these products is paramount. It's something that the businesses and as a society, we owe the people that are going to be exposed to these chemicals in their normal life, whether they're the ones that are using them or not. And if there are problems that arise, we should be able to go back to those parties and say, it's your job to make it right. The second point I wanted to make is that while we all like certainty, as we've learned in recent years, we may not be certain over time. The science does learn new things, and I guess I take pride in being a scientist and being able to learn new things as they come about. We've learned a lot since 1993 when the glyphosate label originally came into effect and the science was developed that supported it. As we've heard just last summer, there is new information. We can take advantage of that new information and refine the use of these powerful chemicals to make sure that the people that use them are safe and make sure that the product still does what it's intended to do. And that's how things really ought to be. The other comment I would make as a former government administrator is that when we think about labels and things like that, we think of administrative processes and how long sometimes they take to reflect the science. And if we know something is a problem and we start the process of changing a label, changing a rule, something like that, it can be years. One rule that I'm currently talking about with one of the state agencies is based on science that is from 2009, and it has not yet gone through the rulemaking process to govern what we know now, even though it's been in the works for a long, long time. So expecting the label to actually reflect what we know isn't always that reliable. It can take years, and a lot of harm can happen in the time in between. With that, I'll answer
Any questions for this
you
witness?
may have.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anybody here else in opposition of Senate Bill 14? Anyone else? Anybody here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator, do you have any final comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I want to thank you all for sitting here this morning. I know this is a very controversial bill. This is my number one priority, so I look forward to the debate that we have on the Senate floor with this, and I would encourage you all to vote yes on this to get on a committee, and thank you again.
Thank you, Senator. That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 14. No further business before the committee. I move that we adjourn. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.